Welcome or welcome back to Pewdiepie. I'm Zui and I hope you enjoyed today's video. But before we get right into it, I'm obligated to remind you to click either the like or dislike button, commenting something down below, and of course sharing the video so more people can see and enjoy it. This is very important as it helps with the YouTube algorithm. I want you to know that your help is greatly appreciated. If you have any suggestions or ideas for a story, my Discord link is in my link tree that is down in the description, as well as my Patreon and Ko-fi for any donations you may want to send my way. Every cent counts. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's video. The devil prowled the streets of the suburb like a starving stray cat. It would soon be Halloween, and he was hungry. The killer wandered the old road, into alleys and abandoned yards. He knew the area, but much had changed since he had been incarcerated. He needed to make sure places were still existing, still be able to hide. Be used to ambush, be used to hunt. The million voices in his mind encouraged his quiet wandering. Yes, Bob's hunger knew no bounds. Or well, sometimes he did gouge a little too much, but he didn't talk much about those times. And then he spotted you, leaving the local Walmart. Your curves, your walk, your appearance, it was everything he ever dreamed of. A treat that looked so tender. Just by looking at you, he could taste you. Bob followed you. Be it through yards, roads, and highways, he'd always managed to be somewhat behind you. There would be nothing standing in his way, nothing. He had a desire and he would chase it. He would chase you to the ends of the world if he had to. He watched you leave your car. He was sweating profusely, out of breath, covered in dirt and scratches. He really shouldn't have run for that rose bush earlier, but then he would have lost you otherwise. So a good trade-off. The killer wandered forward. Carefully, quietly, hiding in your bushes before climbing over your backyard fence, thankfully right into a hedge, where the devil would remain until Halloween. At least, that's what he thought he'd do. As the devil noticed something sinister. You were a nobody, a neat, a worthless human being, living in a house you didn't earn. It was gifted to you by your unalived aunt. Written in her will, everything inside was yours. Of course your parents loved it. They were finally rid of you. It was hard living on your own. At least your parents still paid for the bare necessities like insurances. As a matter of fact, you still lived in your aunt's filth. While not being a hoarder, she had the propensity to collect decorative items. Tacky minimalist furniture that looked cheap yet cost a fortune. And worst of all, a scary amount of stuffed animals from the 80s and 90s. Who were all too dusty and ravaged by moths to be sold online, which probably was the worst thing about it. Your mom promised you help to get rid of the stuff last year, when you moved in. And it still hasn't happened. You didn't even know where to start. At least the local Walmart wasn't all far off, and you created your own little alcove in your aunt's living room. It was a bit sad, honestly. You had a free house, with about 7 rooms plus bathroom, so technically 8. Yet you really only needed 2. Over the past year, you had moved so many things into the other rooms just to empty out the living room to become your special place. You sat down in front of your computer, continuing your gaming session that you had paused just to go grab some snacks and sodas at the superstore. So deep into your gaming you didn't notice the shadow creeping up from the basement. It was big, heavy and dangerous. A demon, like from another world. Thankfully, you were too deep into your gaming and you didn't see it raise its right arm, cooking mallet in hand. Without warning, the cooking tool hit you on the head, not only knocking you out in an instant, but also breaking your headset in half. Arguably, if you had been awake to witness everything, you'd certainly be more upset about that than being kidnapped. As the world was dark around you, you couldn't see the demon grab your legs, pulling you outside through broad daylight. Its luck impeccable. Always seemed like people like him could get away with stuff like this so easily. You awoke when a water bucket was emptied over your head. Screaming and spitting, you came to. First thing you noticed was how freezing it was. Scared, you looked from left to right. No way. Clouds were coming from your mouth. It was so cold. You blinked. You were illuminated by a singular light bulb. And you heard footsteps coming from somewhere behind you. Defiantly, you stared into the darkness, trying to make out shapes. The floor was tiled. There were a couple of drains here and there scattered. Boxes lined the walls, and things were hanging from the ceiling, bulky yet all roughly the same shape. And then it hit you. You were in a walk-in freezer. Ah, damn it. Here, your screams would definitely be useless. That energy be used for something else would be better. Helplessly, you fidgeted against your ropes, but to no avail. It was then, out of the shadows, a man appeared, face twisted into a wide grin. Angrily, Bob fiddled with the lock of the butcher shop. Ironic, yes. The devil butcher breaking into a butcher shop. What a joke. A letter in the window read, "Closed due to rat infestation." Bob scoffed. Of course this place was run by a slop. After all, kidnapping someone in the middle of the day and driving in very obvious van with the name and telephone number of the company, how stupid does one have to be? Angrily, he shoved his shoulder into the door, the weak material giving away to him only minutes later, and he landed on the hard floor. The devil muttered curses as he stood up. His shoulder hurt a lot. Yet she just wiped away the dirt and grime. Inside the building, it was dark and empty. By now the sun was setting behind him, so that was only making things worse. Knife in hand, he walked deeper into the bowels. It was eerily quiet. But Bob needed to be quick, or else he would miss everything. Luckily, the way to the shop's back rooms was open. Slowly, he peeked inside. There were a few things lying about. A box of lockpicks, half of them broken, crude knives with runes on them, and a pentagram drawn in blood on the door leading into the walk-in freezer. Okay, whoever was behind this was a beginner. No, worse, a copycat. No, not even that. Whoever this was probably only read some stupid stuff on the internet and now was considering themselves to be a cult leader or something. Of course, Bob knew how the real stuff looked like. This was nothing. This was hilarious. The perfect comedy, even. But it made him seethe with anger. This person had taken you before he could. and that would not stand. With a face of pure malice, he opened the door to the walk-in freezer. Despite the place clearly being shut down, there was still meat hanging on the chains, and most certainly filled inside the cardboard boxes were more meat. And right in the middle was you, still alive, staring at a figure. They were quite fat. Fatter than him, at least. Had long black hair, and their skin was a sickly grey color. He was talking in Latin, broken Latin, attempting to summon something. And judging by his words, it was a succubus. Of course. It took Bob all his composure to not immediately burst out into violent laughter and scoffs. And as the devil approached the demon, you finally noticed Bob. His teeth and eyes reflecting in the light of the bulb. The glimmer of his knife clearly visible to you. And that was when you lamented the fact that there was a tape over your mouth after your screaming earlier. A one-liner from you would be perfect here. Maybe you'd say something like, "Hey nerd, ready for your wedgie?" Or, "Now that I look at it up close, your face looks like crap, but don't have to worry about that. After all, someone is about to make it look much worse." Or, "Meet you later." Okay, that last one probably wasn't so good. But it was funny. At least that's what you told yourself. Initially, Bob wanted to let the guy live. He wanted you to be the first kill of Halloween. As a matter of fact, it was still a few hours away from Halloween. But the nerd's broken Latin was too much of an insult for Bob. Without any hesitation, he plunged the knife into the man's neck, without him even realizing that there was another person present. Down at the base of his skull, severing the spinal cord, immediately causing the would-be killer to lose all body functions. It happened so quick, he didn't even scream. And like the piece of trash that he was kicked by the killer into the cold shadows. Bob then looked at you, mouth turning into a wide grin, salvia coming out of his mouth, as he cut the ropes holding you down on your chair. "Did you know, in the 17th century, Europeans would line up with cups at public executions to collect the blood of the deceased?" Oh great, the guy who has saved you was just as crazy as the guy who captured you. Great, just your luck. This couldn't get any worse. You looked at him. "Oh, don't worry, pretty lady. It's not Halloween yet. I will not kill you. Besides, he isn't dead either. But he will be in a bit. I suggest you leave right now, okay? And let me do my thing with him." You didn't need another word or invitation. With shivering legs, you just rushed outside, accepting this as a lucky coincidence. Finding yourself in the late evening sun, all you could think of was, how the hell were you ever going to feel safe in that house ever again? A day later, you were sitting on your PC, handling candy in a bowl next to you. You had enough for yourself and the children who would come by. As a safety precaution, you had closed shut all windows, pushed shelves in front of any door, especially before the rooms you didn't use much. Lastly, you took all important items out of the attic before sealing the entrance by locking the keyhole and gluing a piece of paper over the lock, so you would definitely know if someone managed to get up there somehow. And honestly, you kinda hoped someone would be dumb enough to break in up there and then starve to death because they wouldn't be able to open the trapdoor. Your doorbell rang. It was the 4th time tonight. The kids were eager, weren't they? However, when you opened the door, candy bowl in hand, you were greeted by a massive man. The devil who had saved you. Just your luck. Fun fact. Until they were forced by Christians and the government to give up their traditional funeral rites in the 1960s, the Wari people of the Brazilian rainforest ate deceased loved ones in order to process their grief. He just let himself inside after saying that, pushing past you like a bulldozer, despite your protest. You tried to escape, but he grabbed you by the back of your shirt. Don't drop that bowl now, we're just getting started. And it might just save your life. He said, shoving you into your living room, only illuminated by your post-game of 7 Days to Die. How ironic. He let himself sit on your airbed that you had set up in your living room to sleep on, before grabbing you, throwing you on top of his lap. There, shivering, holding the candy bowl, he began to eat, shoving sweets into his mouth with zero abandon. You know, little morsel, he said, I've had many people jump in front of my knife, but I never have I thought I'd do that myself for someone. You gulped but didn't say anything. You really are lucky. Unceremoniously, he grabbed a full handful of M&Ms and loudly devoured them. And you are lucky again, being so nice to give me your candy directly. I almost don't want to eat you now. I feel like... His knife had made its way up your shoulder, the cool metal pressing against your upper arm. I still feel like I'm needing a little bit more encouragement. And then I let you live. For good. But it needs to be something really good. Because usually I don't let tender treats like you go. You opened your mouth, but his finger gently pressed on your lips. Before you say anything, I don't value any money. Take off that whatever you want. You knew what he meant. Well, it did save your life, and it would be saving yours. It was probably both the best and worst way to pick someone up, huh? You sighed in defeat. Finally, he lowered his finger, allowing you to talk. Guess it's your luck I'm into fat guys. Well, I do choose my treats wisely. He dropped his knife, but before you could even think of trying to grab it, he wrapped his arms around your hips, throwing himself back on the bed. Bob held you so tightly you could barely breathe. His hands exploring your chest and ass. You sighed once again, giving in. You had low trust you'd survive this night, but at least you could enjoy your final moments, right? You roll around in his arms, looking into his wild eyes. Leaning forward, you press your soft lips onto his calloused mouth. Almost immediately forced his own tongue into yours, making you gasp and moan in pleasure at the feeling. His tongue was incredibly long and practically wrapped around yours. It was an exhilarating feeling you never thought possible. Bob, meanwhile, however, just hummed as his hands found your butt. He began to pull down your sweatpants while you fiddled with his belt. This was going to be the best Halloween ever.